April 29th, Saturday, 6 a.m. Mountain Time, 2017. Guys, I'm seeing something very unusual on the GOES satellite. What you're looking at is a composite of the United States. This is today, this morning. These are the latest images on the Rainbow Loop. And these images are very impressive. I've never seen anything form like this as one unified system that covers more than half of the United States. I mean, I've seen the big circular rotating ones, yes, but this is some sort of a line, a very strong line, probably where warm air is meeting cold air, but it is huge. It extends from the upper northeast clear down past the Texas Panhandle. And what's unusual about it, it's got everything connected in between, with some very strong energy signatures, especially here in the lower half of Indiana, southern Illinois, Missouri, Oklahoma, the Texas Panhandle, Nebraska. It just sent something very strong through the entire Manhattan Island, New York area. Look at that. And this has just erupted within the last couple of hours.
Northeast Texas hit. This is new video of the tornado that left a trail of damage near Canton. It was one of 3 tornadoes that touched down. East Texas Medical Center tells us that it's treating at least 49 victims right now from the Canton tornado, and that number will likely go up.
This is really some of the most devastating damage that you're going to see in Canton, but you don't have to go far to start seeing the damage after these powerful storms move through. Take a look at these trucks. We're talking a couple tons right here, and they were tossed and flipped over like they're toy cars, and this is just showing you the power of that storm. Now you can see some rain is starting to come down, and we're going to move back and show you even more damage that we're seeing over here, and this really kind of puts it into perspective. When you look over here, this used to be a building and it has been leveled. I mean, this damage, this metal here is really just tangled. You got to watch your step where you're going. And it's really hard to figure out exactly what you're looking at. There's tires here. If you walk back to this side right here, Marie, you can see that we've got a car underneath all of this damage, and you really have to get back in here to look at it. Now, this makes me think about what emergency crews are working against and contending with as they try to go out and look for anybody that's been hurt, injured, or possible fatalities in this area. They've got to move through a scene that looks a lot like this.
A spectacular landslide caused by heavy rains has swept through a village in southern Kyrgyzstan. At least 24 people, including 9 children, were feared dead. Scores of emergency workers have been deployed to the site to excavate the village. The landslide happened early on Saturday when a torrent of mud buried several houses. Local authorities said they had informed people in the area of the risk of a landslide just a few days earlier and had advised them to leave, but many decided to stay. Deadly landslides regularly hit the Central Asian country, where close to 95% of the land is covered by mountains. Sunday has been declared a national day of mourning.
The Philippines has canceled a tsunami warning that had been issued after a 7.2 magnitude quake struck off the coast in the south of the country early on Saturday. Authorities said only a 10-centimeter wave was produced by the quake that struck off the coast of Mindanao Island. It comes after a series of moderately strong quakes that struck the Philippine archipelago last week.
California could be in major trouble because of climate change. In some cases, landlocked regions could eventually have beaches. An updated government report says in one severe scenario, sea levels could rise by 10 feet over the next century. That could mean tens of thousands of homes and businesses lost, as well as power plants, water treatment facilities, and hundreds of miles of roadways in the coastal state. The report says when ice melts in Antarctica, sea levels near California could rise more than the rest of the world. Sea levels have been rising for thousands thousands of years, but starting in 2050, that rate could be 30 to 40 times faster than what we've seen over the past century. California has some of the strictest rules on emissions in the nation, as it's particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. But the eco-friendly state's rules run contrary to the Trump administration's latest emission efforts. President Donald Trump signed an executive order in March to roll back regulations on carbon emissions.
President Donald Trump's inauguration was greeted with a women's march, and as he marks 100 days in office, tens of thousands of people walked on Washington to demand he rethinks his climate change policies.
Tens of thousands of people are here in Washington, D.C. for the Climate March, and it's one of the hottest days on record for April 29th in D.C. history.
There's a lot of energy, there's maybe anger, you might even say, but if you can focus that, like you can hear it right now, and get people to work together on something, that's where I think change comes from. But I think this is a good first step.
Organizers say about 150,000 people took part in Saturday's climate march in D.C. Hundreds of other marches sprung up around the U.S. and globally.
Similar protest marches are taking place right now in Chicago, Denver, Seattle.
This comes exactly 100 days into the Trump presidency, and just hours after the Environmental Protection Agency, led by oil and gas ally Scott Pruitt, removed a page on climate change from its website.
This past week, President Trump's plan to build a border wall was put on hold after he backed off demands for Congress to fund it. But the border wall debate rages on in Arizona. Carter Evans paid a visit to a Native American tribe fighting to keep the wall off its land.
So this is it. This is where you can go and I have to stop.
Well, you stop right there.
Verlin Jose is vice chairman of the Tohono O'odham Nation, a tribe of American Indians allowed to cross the border where most Americans cannot.
We can cross the traditional with our tribal IDs. You cross, you have to go to an official port of entry.
The Tohono O'odham Nation is roughly the size of Connecticut. It straddles 62 miles along the Mexican-American border in Arizona. Tribal members live on both sides and are caught in the middle of the border debate. They allowed the federal government to build a vehicle barrier in 2006, but they strongly oppose a wall through their land. The current border fence cuts right through this ranch, which is owned by a tribal member, and their well is now on the Mexican side of the border. A wall here would make it impossible to get to. Do you want a wall right here?
I do not want a wall there. There actually is no word for wall in our language because we were never contained. If you really want to secure your city and town, build it around your city and town.
I'm all for anything that helps protect our country.
Mark Lamb is the sheriff of neighboring Pinal County, 80 miles north of the border. He showed us a path illegal immigrants and smugglers used to pass through the reservation and enter his county, where nearly 3,500 illegal border crossers were detained in January alone.
Would a wall in the Indian reservation be helpful?
Absolutely.
It's a deterrent.
It's a deterrent. A lot of people think that's insensitive. It's not. We're protecting our home. We're protecting what's ours.
Tribal leaders say they're working with federal agents to better protect the border, spending $3 million a year. But building a wall is a step too far.
As far as you're concerned, this is not Mexico and this is not the U.S.
This is technically O'odham Hajiwat, translate to the people's land.
And since the federal government gave control of this land to the Tohono O'odham more than 150 years ago, it will now require an act of Congress to take it back and build a wall.
Russian authorities have reportedly detained dozens of protesters calling on President Vladimir Putin not to seek re-election next year. Activists said at least 100 people were arrested in St. Petersburg. There was no official confirmation of the arrests. In Moscow and other cities, hundreds of anti-Putin militants gathered under the slogan, "We're sick of him." This woman says she's upset about high food prices, unemployment, and deteriorating health care. You need to pay for everything up front and spend days and nights in a clinic to see a specialist doctor, she says. This man says he came to make his voice heard and call on the president to ensure a change of leadership. I hope that will finally put an end to our country's international isolation and will stop Russia's aggression against other countries, he says. Putin is widely expected to seek a fourth term in the March 2018 presidential election. Protesters peacefully lined up outside the offices of his administration to hand over petitions calling on him not to run.
8 Syrian civil defense workers who are known as the White Helmets. They've been killed, we're told, in an airstrike on one of their offices in the northwest Hama province of Syria. The rescue service claims on Twitter that Russian warplanes are deliberately targeting hospitals, civilians, and their rescue centers. As you may know, the White Helmets are a search and rescue organization made up entirely of volunteers, and they've been hailed across the globe for their selflessness and their courage and their work in the face of what they're dealing with. They are largely operating in opposition-held parts of Syria.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Saturday that Moscow is ready to cooperate with the United States on settling the Syrian crisis. Russian authorities occasionally mention that they are willing to renew cooperation with Washington on Syria on fighting global terrorism, but relations between the two countries met a new low in April after the U.S. fired missiles at Syria for its suspected use of poison gas. Russia is a Syrian ally. According to Reuters and Russian news agencies, Lavrov's deputy says Russia hopes Syria's armed opposition will take part in peace talks in Astana, Kazakhstan on May 3rd and 4th.
Around 300 U.S. Marines have been deployed to Afghanistan's volatile Helmand province. They'll support the NATO-led mission to train Afghan security forces in their fight against the Taliban. It's the first time that U.S. Marines have been in Helmand since 2014. That's when control of the region was returned to the Afghans. But since then, the Taliban has retaken much of the province.
Seoul and Washington complete their full legal exercise on Sunday. The 2-month-long annual joint military drill involves some 300,000 South Korean soldiers and 10,000 U.S. troops. Though it is purely defensive in nature, tension mounts during the combined training as Pyongyang perceives it as a preparation for an invasion. The U.S. aircraft carrier Carl Vinson, meanwhile, is still taking part in a different joint exercise with the Korean Navy that began on Saturday, expected to end sometime this week. The Nimitz-class supercarrier that took part in drills last month and had left the area, but was called back seemingly in response to North Korean provocations.
The DPRK has once again warned against a nuclear war as the USS Carl Vinson strike group holds military drills with South Korea. The official newspaper of the DPRK's ruling Workers' Party, Rodong-Sinmun, published an article titled "Reckless Provocation to Ignite Nuclear War." The commentary called the latest move by the US reckless and provocative, saying it was a dangerous scenario to provoke a nuclear war. It also said it was the DPRK's right to counter the provocation with a preemptive attack using nuclear force as a pivot.
The French Navy ship Mistral has arrived in Japan's southern city of Nagasaki for a military drill. The 4 nations participating include Japan, the US, the UK, and France. A welcoming ceremony was held by Japanese Self-Defense Force personnel. The navies of France and Japan will participate in military drills based on realistic scenarios, such as a possible clash at sea for the first time. The ship's arrival comes hours after the DPRK's failed ballistic missile test.
Southeast Asian nations stand united, but they're growing worried about their unpredictable North Korean neighbor. At a regional summit, they urged the U.S. to show restraint after Pyongyang's latest missile test. The notoriously blunt Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte said one misstep would be a catastrophe and Asia would be the first victim of a nuclear war.
There seems to be two countries playing with their toys, and those toys are not really to entertain. And we have to caution everybody, including those who would give the advice to the two power players because they have the nuclear warheads, to just show restraint.
It's an issue that's reached boiling point and threatens us all with nuclear destruction. Those are the words of Pope Francis on the dispute between North Korea and the US. The pontiff said he believed a third country such as Norway should try to mediate in the dispute. Returning from a visit to Egypt, the Pope said a widened war would destroy not half of humanity, but a large part of humanity. It would be terrible. Let's stop and find a diplomatic solution, he says. Pope Francis said he'd be willing to meet President Trump to discuss the matter when he visits Europe next month. But he says so far he's not aware of any request for a meeting from Washington.
On his first trip to Egypt, Pope Francis celebrated a mass at Cairo's Air Defense Stadium under tight security just 3 weeks after Islamist militants killed dozens in attacks on 2 Coptic Christian churches. Some 15,000 Egyptians gathered to hear the Pope as he called on believers to unite against fanaticism. God is pleased only by a faith that's proclaimed by our lives, because the only extremism believers can have is that of charity. Any other extremism does not come from God and is not pleasing to Him. The Pope also said Egypt played a key role in achieving peace in the Middle East. His 2-day trip aimed to mend ties with the Muslim world and show solidarity with the country's persecuted Coptic Christian minority.
Turkey has blocked all access to Wikipedia, the online encyclopedia, which is edited by volunteers. The Information Ministry says the website has been banned because it publicised information linking terror with Turkey. Officials said they'd warned Wikipedia before blocking it and will lift the ban if the website cooperates with court orders to take down the content. In a statement to TRT World, Wikipedia said it's seeking a judicial review of the decision and hopes the issue can be resolved promptly.
Finally tonight, 2 parents confronting the unimaginable. Their newborn in need of an organ donor to stay alive and a friend ready to give the ultimate gift.
8-month-old Finn O'Sullivan will never remember what just happened to him, but his parents will never forget. Finn, born with not 1, but 2 rare liver conditions.
He was waiting on 2 waiting lists, but those waits can be indefinite.
So Finn's parents scrambled to find a match within their friends and family, but relatives were not matching up. Then Finn's godmother, Sarah, decided to get tested.
I just had a feeling that I might be the one.
And she was right. Finn's mother describing the moment in this video diary.
When we found out that Sarah was a match for Finn and that she wanted to go ahead with the donation, it literally brought me to my knees. There are no words to ever express my gratitude to Sarah at giving my son a second chance at life.
But Sarah would have it no other way. The 2 women were friends since they were little kids and lived right next door to each other, together every step of the way.
You okay, Sarah?
And this was the scene inside that hospital room after Sarah gave Finn that life-saving gift.
When I saw Finn after the surgery, I don't think there's quite words to express. I'm in awe of him completely. And to see the whites of his eyes and the fact that he wasn't yellow anymore and even his hair color changed, and the team of doctors and myself, we did that. It was pretty amazing, and he's such a strong person. So I just felt this wave of relief.